Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Kazusa's ending of the mini after story. We are starting out with chapter 2. So, you chose to neglect your poor mother, who hasn't seen you in forever, in favor of fooling around with your husband, whom you live with. You truly are a thankless daughter. Well, what do you expect? I've had it drilled into every corner of my body that I simply can't live without Haruki. Hey, you don't have to say it like that. Wow, imagine talking to your own mother like that. But I think that kind of shows the relationship that Kazusa and her mom have. It's not exactly mother-daughter, because a lot happened between them. A lot had gone on today, but we completed our meeting with the Japanese branch, Kudo-san, in the afternoon, which meant that our work in Japan was officially finished. Although some might consider this event, dining with the director, a legitimate sort of work in its own right. That said, neither the hostess in question nor the guests seemed to be in that sort of frame of mind. I mean, obviously, they're mother and daughter. It's definitely not just a dining with the director kind of situation. Anyway, Mom, when I was a kid, you were never particularly motherly with me. This is just what you deserve. Kazusa, you're so unforgiving. I could die alone in some desolate corner of the world, and you wouldn't care, would you? Ah, me. I didn't raise you correctly. You're not wrong there. You're pretty merciless yourself, Guitar-kun. You're not wrong there. That's so funny. I'm very, very critical of Kazusa's mom. Honestly, I think what she did is horrible, abandoning Kazusa like that. I'm not the type of person that kind of forgave her and is like, whatever. So, 1,000% agree there. Look, the day before our flight here, didn't I video chat with you for like 5 hours? Now that you mention it, perhaps you did. Don't forget, Kazusa, this is part of your job. Still, it was a nice, intimate family meal. Normally, these two were far, far from each other. But lately, Kazusa had been starting to get a handle on using IT tools, and she concentrated on communicating with Yoko-san. Well, let's dispense with all the formal nonsense and raise a toast. The formal nonsense, as if they were being formal at all. Now, would you kindly explain to me exactly what part of our conversation up to now has been formal? Oh God, I hate it when Haruki and I have the same opinions on things. With Haruki thrown into the mix, no family gathering could stay formal for long, huh? Really, you should be cursing yourself for choosing to be controlled so rigidly instead of being independent, like me. Want to run that by me again? They were making a deeper, longer connection than their time living together, as though they were trying to make up for lost time. Say, by the way, is he still rigid? How old do you think we are? Obviously, he's rigid every day. Would you two please refrain from saying things that could easily be misconstrued? Weirdly perverted mother-daughter relationship. It's just like, it really does seem like friends that grew up together is how they kind of talk to each other. It's so weird. It's so odd. Of course, as someone who had no choice but to be involved with these two and their extremely close bond, there were probably certain things I was just going to have to endure. More crazy expensive alcohol. Well, why not? My daughter and I haven't been able to spend any time one-on-one in forever. The wine Yoko-san ordered was a 1989 Chateau Haut-Briand. I don't know if I pronounced that properly at all. I have no idea how to talk about wine, but it sounds good. Or champagne. Is that wine or champagne? I'm not even sure. I had only read up on it a little in wine features in magazines before, but I had the feeling it could easily run higher than 100,000 a bottle. Okay, so it is a wine. And 100,000 yen is about 1,000 US dollars, so that is a very expensive wine. Hey, Kazusa, do you remember? This is the same one I ordered the first time we ever dined in this restaurant. Why would I remember that? You chugged the whole thing down yourself. Incidentally, 1989 happened to be the year I was born. No. Yoko-san probably chose that vintage for a slightly different reason. You're right. You were still a minor then, blubbering because a boy had dumped you for the first time. Oh, that's tough. That was after the introductory chapter concert when they kind of showed the extra scene when you go back and replay it. And Kazusa is talking to her mom in the restaurant basically about Haruki, and it comes out that she really likes him, but Setsuna has him. And it was so sad. And she cried. And it was the first time we see her, like, really let those feelings out. If you say one more word about that, I'm leaving. And I'm not talking about going back to the hotel. I mean back to Vienna. It seemed to me that this wine-related memory was something I would be reluctant to delve any deeper into. Look, even putting aside the price, did you get permission from the doctor for this? Yes, it's all right, as long as I just have a little. I have no intention of letting my life go to waste. Now that you mention it, how has your health been lately? Well, I'm doing my best. I take my treatment very seriously, and I never miss a dosage of my medicine. I've been following the doctor's instructions to the letter. Yoko-san had been diagnosed with leukemia about 3 years before. So here's where things are so sad, and where the relationship between Kazusa and her mom is really, I think, interesting. I think it fleshes it out on a different level because we know that Yoko-san is very ill. And we know that they had such a strained relationship through childhood. And so now Kazusa's, in a way, trying to be as close as possible to her now. And it's just, the dynamic is painful. It's very, very painful. At first, in Yoko-san's own words, it was the sort of illness where even tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, but she kept at it with persistent treatment, and now it seemed to be in remission. Yes, I should at least be able to name my first grandchild, stand proud as he enters school, admire his proud form at the coming-of-age ceremony, and read a memorial address at his funeral. With the life that I have left, just watch. Oof, it's super awkward to talk about the life you have left, especially in front of Kazusa. I mean, look how quiet she is. Now, that's just reaching demonic levels. Also, would you mind not suddenly bringing up the death of our child who hasn't even been born yet? Well, if you don't want me to turn into a demon, you better hurry up and let me see my grandchild's face, hadn't you? Well, I'll think about it. In the face of this conversation and its uncertain connection to reality, Kazusa quickly changed her brash attitude from before and focused quietly on eating her food. To tell the truth, even now, conversations with Yoko-san were always like this, where there would be plenty of frivolous chit-chat all around, but the instant the subject turned to Yoko-san's condition, she clammed up. Normally, even when she was video chatting with Yoko-san, they never even touched on the subject of the illness. That's tough. That's very tough. It's not something you want to bring up, especially as someone's child. Like, no. You don't want to think about the inevitability of what's going to happen. Especially Touma, who was abandoned for so long. You don't want to think about losing your mom again. Well, it wasn't like I didn't understand the feeling. Actually, maybe I understood it a little too well. But the fact was, I needed to know. After all, if some emergency were to arise with Yoko-san, it would fall to me to take care of Kazusa's emotional state. This was my first duty, above all others. I had made a promise to Yoko-san. So let's raise a toast to our new family member, who may well be born soon. You'll keep it up, won't you, Kazusa? I never said I didn't want to do it, all right? I've just had a certain greedy manager holding me back. So, like I said, we'll think about it. One of the reasons I hadn't pressured Kazusa for a child right away was so it wasn't layered on top of other worries about when the time came. I didn't want to burden Kazusa with handling a meeting and a parting at the same time. What a sentence. That is a beautifully written sentence, and such a tragic sentence as well. That's really tough, and that's the reality for a lot of people. At the time people grow up and are ready to have kids, sometimes their parents are just not in good health. That's life. In the end, Kazusa was what mattered most to me. For her sake, I was prepared to sacrifice Yoko-san's happiness. Although, to Yoko-san, it was basically the same thing. Oh. Yoko-san knew that I had rationally calculated when that time would come. She also knew that, at any moment, I was prepared to take everything on from her, like a baton pass. In that sense, I suppose, that since we were willing to speak so frankly about these things, we really were like a parent and child by now. So, about that schedule... Seriously? You're talking about our wedding now? Well, yes. You haven't been formally married yet, right? With the food still coming and the wine being passed around, everyone was starting to speak a little more freely. I don't think it's that weird to bring it up then. I mean, you've moved past the difficult subject, talk about having kids, and now you're talking about a wedding. It's not that weird. In the end, Yoko-san began to tell us her true purpose in calling us back to Japan. It's not that rare nowadays to skip having a ceremony. Which was to say, the wedding ceremony between me and Kazusa. A ceremony to bless the two of us who had committed the unforgivable act of betraying everything and fleeing Japan on our own. That won't do at all. You haven't even given your mother a bouquet yet. We must be the only family in the world where the parent would pester the child over that. Absolutely not. No, parents are supposed to fret over things like that. Especially when it comes to being married. Look, I have whittled my money and life away, waiting for the day when you would read that letter out loud, tears in your eyes, and say, "Mother, thank you for everything you've done for me." Why is your love so twisted? Ever since we had arrived in Vienna 3 years ago, we had lived with our backs turned on those we used to love before. That's sad. A lot of Kazusa and Haruki's relationship was kind of running away from the present and only focusing on each other. Which I think is fine, but the fact that they kind of threw out everything, every connection they had, that's not healthy. That's not good. I'm glad they're slowly building things up now. It was 6 months ago that we finally began to see signs that the snow was melting. Yoko-san came to Vienna in spite of her illness, and the two of you need to hurry up and get yourselves prepared. You knew very well that this would happen, and you still came to Japan, didn't you? Yes, we did know. This wasn't exactly a surprise attack. Yoko-san was definitely the arm-twisting type, but in the end, we hadn't refused. There was that sense of guilt, being in the same place as the people we had made unhappy, the heavy conscience of looking them in the face so brazenly, the memory of the awful way we had parted. There was still a lot of pain left in us, surrounding our return to Japan. That's tough. A lot of bad memories, and when you run away from something, it makes it even hard to go back to it. But in the end, you need to. You need to wrap that stuff up in order to achieve true peace, as they say. But there was also the joy of standing once more in the same place as those we loved, the undying yearning for the country where we were born and raised. the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, we could be forgiven. These optimistic feelings, too, remained in our hearts. For now, the location and schedule are a secret. I'll let you know when the time comes. There was absolutely nothing we could do with an outrageous plan like that. And yet, we couldn't fault Yoko for that outrageousness, so we simply gazed into her elated face. Until then, go and have your fill of Japan. It's been such a long time. Why don't you go and visit your friends? What a final sentence. Why don't you go and visit your friends? There is a lot of baggage to go along with Haruki, Kazusa, and any of their friends. Literally anybody. But what a good place to leave awe. So, thank you so much for being here with me on this episode of the mini after story, Kazusa's Route, and I'll be back to you with more content soon. So until then, I hope you take care. See you.